After a tense confrontation with my mother-in-law, who harshly criticized my job situation and educational background, things escalated dramatically when she suddenly splashed me with hot water. The attack was completely unprovoked, and while I miraculously avoided injury, the potential for serious harm was clear. I was stunned by her extreme actions, especially since it was my husband, not me, who was unemployed. The resentment I felt toward her unreasonable behavior grew unbearable. Enough is enough, I declared to myself. If this is how you want things to be, I'll have no choice but to leave. To my surprise, my mother-in-law seemed almost satisfied by my decision, showing no sign of remorse. Unable to endure the toxic environment any longer, I decided to return to my parents' house. What she didn't realize was that I had been the primary financial supporter of our household, making about $41,000 a month through stock trading after leaving my job. Despite being forced out, I was confident in my ability to support myself. My relationship with my husband, Eric, began in college, where we both pursued economics with dreams of careers in finance. After we landed jobs at different brokerage firms, Eric proposed, and I eagerly accepted, excited about our future together. However, our plans took an unexpected turn when he asked me to quit my job to move in with him and his mother, who needed support after his father's passing. Though I hesitated at first, I ultimately agreed, hoping it wouldn't become a burden. Yet, in light of recent events, I found myself regretting that decision and vowed never to assist my mother-in-law again, even as she struggled financially. After Eric lost his father, he became his mother's sole companion in middle school. As an only child, he was deeply concerned for her well-being, which I respected. So, when the time came, I agreed to move in with them, and 3 weeks later, we settled into Eric's family home. At first, my mother-in-law seemed delighted to have her son back, but her attitude shifted dramatically once I entered the picture. Her cold, unwelcoming gaze made it clear that I wasn't wanted. Despite feeling like an outsider, I tried to maintain a positive outlook, dismissing the faint mutterings I thought I heard from her. Maybe they were about me, maybe not. I chose to let it slide. However, living with her soon became far more difficult than I had anticipated. One morning, I was abruptly woken at 5 a.m. by her loud voice demanding that I get up and make breakfast. Her reasoning? Don't just lay around because you're not working, she scolded sharply, although the early hour made it feel ridiculous. I didn't argue and began preparing the meal while enduring her incessant critiques about my speed and efficiency. Breakfast was finally ready after what felt like an eternity, though it was only 25 minutes. I apologized for the delay, only to be met with more complaints about how long it took. Then came her next grievance: the soup was too salty. I honestly didn't think it was, but to her, my cooking seemed like a personal attack on her health. What are you saying? Do you think there's something wrong with my taste? Are you trying to kill me with this salty food? She accused, stunned by her harsh words. I couldn't help but question her motives, feeling a mix of curiosity and concern. Finally, I asked, "Why are you so harsh on me? What are you talking about? I don't think I'm being harsh. Are you trying to make me the villain here?" "That's not what I meant," I replied, but her relentless pressure left me too overwhelmed to defend myself. "Finish eating and start cleaning. After that, there's laundry to do, no time to rest," she commanded. From that moment on, every day turned into an unending barrage of criticisms and tasks that drained me both mentally and physically. As I cleaned, she would point out, "You missed the dust in the corner," and while doing laundry, she would complain, "There's still a stain." About a month into living with her, I felt myself nearing a breaking point, so I decided to talk to Eric about it. "It's about your mother," I began hesitantly. "She's been really critical every day, and it's becoming difficult for me. Could you please ask her to ease up?" Eric's response, however, was silence, which irritated me momentarily. But then I noticed he looked unusually pale, as if weighed down by something significant. "What's wrong? Did something happen?" I asked, concerned. After a pause, he finally revealed, "Actually, I've been fired from the company." I was stunned, unable to process his words. Immediately? Is this some kind of joke? "It's not a joke," Eric explained. He went on to say that due to an economic downturn, the company had to downsize, and he was among those laid off. "So you'll be unemployed starting tomorrow?" I asked, trying to grasp the situation. "Well, I can work for one more month after receiving the notice of dismissal, but after that..." Fortunately, I had been applying the knowledge I gained from my time at the securities company to trade stocks. Although it was challenging at first, I was now earning about $41,000 a month, so we weren't struggling financially. I comforted Eric, temporarily pushing aside the harassment from my mother-in-law. From that point on, I continued to endure her harsh treatment as Eric lost his job. Feeling the need to be strong and support him, I pushed through the difficult situation. A month went by, and Eric officially became unemployed. At first, he actively sought a new job, but gradually he began to spend most of his time at home, making excuses. "Shouldn't you start looking for a job more seriously?" I suggested, hoping to motivate him to find a new path forward. "I'm looking, but it's tough to find a good company that fits me," Eric replied, his voice lacking urgency or intent. Soon, I found myself reluctantly taking on the role of the main provider for us. As time went on, my mother-in-law's harshness only intensified, and I felt more drained with each passing day. Initially, I thought I had to put up with her behavior because Eric was out of work, but that reasoning began to feel less and less justifiable. My days blurred into a cycle of listlessness. One morning, in a rare turn of events, Eric left the house early, possibly to finally start a serious job hunt. After he left, I began my usual chores. "Make sure it's clean, do it properly," I told myself. My mother-in-law nagged from her spot on the living room sofa, sipping her coffee and throwing sarcastic comments my way. Fed up, I chose to ignore her. Suddenly, she lost her temper and shouted, "How dare you ignore me? You're just a mere daughter-in-law without a job." I kept cleaning, trying to block out her harsh words. Her anger escalated, and she confronted me again, yelling, "Still ignoring me? Unemployed and uneducated people like you should leave this house." In a fit of rage, she splashed the hot water she had prepared for her coffee on me. "It's hot. Please stop," I screamed, shocked by her sudden aggression. Thankfully, the water wasn't boiling, so I avoided serious burns, but the situation could have been disastrous. With a venomous tone, she retorted, "This is what I've been saying, if you're not working, get out of my house." Her smirk was cold and unfeeling, exhausted by her relentless hostility. I felt I had no choice but to comply with her demand. "All right, I'll leave." "Good, that makes things easier. Leave quickly," she snapped. I hurriedly packed my belongings and decided to leave that very day, unwilling to endure another moment in such a toxic environment. I headed straight to my parents' home. Upon my arrival, my parents were surprised by my sudden visit but welcomed me warmly. I waited for a call from Eric, but it never came. No calls, no messages. Feeling isolated, I resolved not to reach out until he did. A month passed since I returned to my parents' house, but still no word from Eric. My feelings for him gradually diminished, and I began to consider divorce. Then, one early morning, the doorbell rang unexpectedly at my parents' house. When I glanced at the monitor, I was shocked to see both Eric and my mother-in-law standing outside. "What now?" I muttered to myself, baffled by their unexpected appearance after all this time. "Yes? What can I do for you?" I asked through the intercom. I've forgiven you. Now come back home quickly, my mother-in-law shouted, her voice as harsh as ever. Forgiving me? What are you talking about? I was perplexed. I hadn't done anything to warrant her forgiveness. Frustrated by her presumptuousness, I ended the intercom call, boiling with anger. However, they didn't leave. Instead, they began banging violently on the front door. Don't just hang up on me. Come on, let's go back, my mother-in-law yelled, her urgency ringing in my ears. Concerned that their loud presence might disturb the neighbors, I reluctantly opened the door and invited them inside. Once they were seated on the living room sofa, I demanded to know the reason for their sudden visit. It struck me as particularly strange, given that it had been my mother-in-law who insisted I leave in the first place. And now she wanted me to come back. The entire situation was bewildering. You're the one who told me to leave. There's no way I can go back now, I asserted, my frustration evident. My mother-in-law accused me of being childish and insisted that she had forgiven me, demanding that I return to her house. She even claimed she would allow an unemployed and uneducated person like me to stay. But I'm not the unemployed one. It's Eric. And if I go back, you'll just take advantage of me every day. I might not be working, but what about your son? Huh? I retorted, hoping to clarify the situation. Eric seemed taken aback, and my mother-in-law looked confused, as if Eric hadn't informed her about his job loss. After some hesitation, Eric finally admitted that he had been laid off. Apologies and explanations followed, with him trying to justify his silence by saying he relied on my income for financial stability. My mother-in-law, clearly shocked by the revelation, openly expressed her anger toward Eric for not finding a new job yet. Why did you keep quiet about this? What are we going to do now? She scolded him. Eric assured his mother that my income would suffice for the time being, which only prompted her to label him as worthless for not actively seeking employment. Fed up with Eric's excuses and the entire ordeal, I couldn't believe they expected me to just return and pretend nothing had happened. When my mother-in-law suggested I come back, I flatly refused. Considering all the mistreatment I had endured, their unexpected visit quickly escalated into a heated argument, especially when the truth about her shocking act of pouring hot water on me came to light. Eric was horrified to learn about this incident and immediately confronted his mother. Why did you do that? He demanded, his voice filled with disbelief. She confessed, claiming her actions stemmed from my ignoring her. This revelation ignited a fiery exchange between Eric and his mother, forcing me to intervene and suggest they take their dispute back to their own home. My intervention, emphasizing the discomfort their loud arguing caused in someone else's space, seemed to shift their attitudes. Where they had been assertive and domineering, they now turned pleading, begging me to return and promising there would be no further trouble. But I saw right through their assurances. Eric's promise to find a job felt insincere, and my mother-in-law's vow to stop causing trouble seemed equally unreliable. I voiced my doubts, making it clear that I found their promises empty and that they would likely take advantage of me again. Their silence in response only confirmed my suspicions. Leaving them in the living room, I retreated to my room to gather my thoughts. When I returned 10 minutes later, I found them still seated in silence, heads bowed, seemingly reflecting on the situation. Frustrated by their quietness, I finally broke the silence. How long do you plan to stay quiet? It doesn't matter to me anymore. Instead of responding verbally, I took decisive action. I handed Eric a document I had prepared in advance, a pre-filled divorce form with my name signed on it. Eric looked at the document, utterly confused and taken aback. I explained bluntly, "Can't you see it's a divorce form? I'm done with someone who won't find a job and didn't even bother to contact me after I returned to my parents' house." "Don't do this, please. This is too sudden," he protested, his stubbornness only irritating me further as he seemed oblivious to how his actions had caused our marital problems. Unmoved by his pleas, I stood firm in my decision, ready to move on from the turmoil and start anew. Free from the dysfunction that had overshadowed my life for too long, I had made up my mind. My decision to divorce Eric was final, and nothing he could say would change that. Still in shock, Eric questioned if the divorce was too harsh. I responded firmly, "I don't think so. This is your fault." I directed that same sternness toward my mother-in-law, who was also responsible for the situation. Resigned, Eric signed the divorce papers but cautioned me not to regret my decision. However, I felt a profound sense of relief, confident that the one who would regret this would not be me, but Eric. "I'll submit the divorce papers. I don't want any compensation. Just go home," I declared, finalizing my separation from Eric. Though it might have seemed harsh, distancing myself was necessary to escape the continuous harassment from my mother-in-law and the strain of Eric's unemployment. 3 weeks later, while enjoying a quiet day at my parents' house, I received an unexpected call from my former mother-in-law. She informed me that the electricity and gas had been cut off at her house and insinuated that I might have had something to do with it. I explained that since the divorce, I had ceased covering Eric's and her living expenses. Desperate for help, she asked if I could pay just for that month. I found the request absurd, given that we were no longer related and I no longer lived there. I firmly declined, suggesting she ask Eric for assistance since he had promised to find a job. Unable to accept my refusal, she pleaded for help, playing the ex-wife card, but I remained resolute, ending the call and blocking her number to avoid any further entanglements. At last, I had severed ties with both my ex-mother-in-law, who had persistently harassed me, and Eric, who had proven himself unreliable. Life at my parents' house gradually became peaceful, a stark contrast to the tumultuous times I had left behind. I began to enjoy a newfound sense of tranquility and freedom, relieved to have distanced myself from such a toxic environment. Several months after closing that turbulent chapter of my life, I found myself on holiday, checking stock charts and reveling in the calm of my new routine. It was then that I received an unexpected message from Eric. In it, he apologized for everything, acknowledging his past reliance on me and mentioning that he had recently found work at a factory. Despite his apology, I felt no desire to re-engage with that part of my life. Eric wrote about his mother's continued harsh behavior and expressed a wish for me to come back. But as I read his message, I was convinced that reconciliation was off the table. I chose to block Eric's number, firmly closing that door for good. 8 months post-divorce, life took a more positive turn when a friend introduced me to a new man. He was dependable and treated me with respect. And despite our age difference, we quickly forged a strong connection. While we weren't rushing toward marriage, I cherished the happy moments we shared. He brought a sense of joy and stability that I had long missed, allowing me to focus on the present and leave my troubled past behind. With him, I began to truly rebuild my life, appreciating each day as it came and looking forward to what the future might hold.